Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Woodland Hills Camera and Telescope or telescopes.net live stream. This one is going to be a very long day because we have to wait for Christopher Go to wake up, who's all the way in the Philippines. But for now, let's only go about halfway across the planet from me to Belgium, I believe. And I have Emil here, the guy that wrote Autostakkert, and I know a lot of you out there know what Autostakkert is and use this program religiously, but there are some buttons and things like that some of us don't know what it does. So I thought, you know what, instead of it coming from me, why don't I get the guy that actually wrote the software to tell you all about it and give you more information, and then all the other cool features that you probably didn't even know about. So Emil, tell everybody at home about yourself and all about Autostakkert.
Okay, so my name is Emil Kraaikamp. I live in Belgium for the last 8 years. I've developed Autostakkert like 10 years ago, basically to help make my life easier, because I was taking a shit ton of images. I'll try not to swear that much. I was taking a lot of images and I just didn't have the time to process everything. So I decided to build something that could help me with that. So that's when I started Autostakkert back in 2009, I think. I started imaging myself in 2006, so that's some time ago. The last couple of years, I've been imaging less and less, unfortunately, partly due to being busy at work and also planets not being in a very nice position at the moment for us Northerners. Yeah, I think that's pretty much the introduction that I wanted to give.
Pretty much. So let's pretty much get into all of this. Just as a ground rules for you guys watching at home, hold your questions towards the end. We will have a extended Q&A. We've allotted almost 2 hours for all of this, just in case we go over time, that we usually go over time anyway. But that's not the point. So remember, keep your questions towards the end. If there is something very pressing, feel free to just fire it out. I am monitoring the chat constantly. So Emil, take it away. Let's start the screen share.
Let me see if I can find the right button there. Share. Okay, I think that should be okay.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen. So let's make it a little bit bigger for those guys at home.
Okay. Yeah, so I was a bit scared when you said 2 hours, but we'll see how far we can.
I don't think we're going to go 2 hours. I really hope not, because I do have to have a break at some point.
Exactly, I'm exhausted after half an hour of speaking, so then I will have a short break probably. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I didn't prepare anything in the sense of like a presentation. I will go through the program as well as I can, and I wrote down a few things for myself on a separate monitor here, so I know where I am and what I have covered and what I should still cover. I already wrote down a bunch of questions that I saw online that people wanted me to explain, so I will do that. And okay, basically, there are a few versions of Autostakkert out there. There's only one version that I really maintain at the moment, and that's the 64-bit version of Autostakkert, which is Autostakkert 3. So Autostakkert 2 is no longer being developed, but I know that some people still use it, and even it shares a lot of the same features, but like bug reports, I don't really handle anymore for Autostakkert 2. This year, I've spent quite a bit of time on further developing Autostakkert, so I'm calling it Autostakkert 4. No big surprise there, and I will mostly use that version during this presentation to show a little bit what is new. But there's not that much new. So again, it looks very similar to Autostakkert 3, and if you, I hope you don't get lost there. I'm sure that will be fine. So I will open up Autostakkert 4. like I said, it looks very similar to Autostakkert 3. You have like a main window, which allows you to do all the different processing steps. And you have the window that can show the frames that are in a video file that you are going to process. Tiny introduction about what Autostakkert actually is. I'm sure that most of you know, but for those that don't, Autostakkert is Lucky imaging software, and that is to say that it's trying to analyze video files or a lot of images closely recorded in time, and picking out those frames that are better than other frames, or those parts of frames that are better than other parts of frames, and putting them together in one image that is often of higher quality than any single frame in the video file is. So the idea is to make pretty images basically of planets, because that's what Autostakkert is focused on, but also of moon recordings or solar recordings, and even a tiny bit of deep sky, which I will try to show later on. Okay, so first of all, how do you use the software and how you can open files in it? Very simple. There's a big button called Open, and you can click on that and you can browse to the files that you want to open. That's not the only way to open files. You can also, from an Explorer, drag and drop files onto the software, and then it will open those files. At the bottom right of the screen, you can see how many files are currently open. So I dragged one file on there. Now I will drag 3 files on there, and you can see 1 of 3. It will only show the first file, but once you start working on the software and you press the stack button, it will process all 3 files. So you can do batch processing. Okay, let's go back to just one recording that I will use throughout the first part of this talk. Pretty much at random, I think. A very pretty recording of Jupiter. This was, I cheat a bit here. This was not imaged with my own telescope. This was imaged with the Pic de Midi telescope in the southern part of France, which is a 1-meter telescope. And in 2017, I was lucky enough to visit that place and record the planets for a couple of nights in excellent seeing conditions. And with a 1-meter telescope, that's just, yeah, a lot of fun. Don't worry, I will not only use these recordings, but yeah, it's just a lot of fun to work with high quality data. So I'll start with this. So the first thing that you have to do, again, this is basic for people that don't know it, but I go over everything. I'll try to go over everything. So the first thing that you need to do is select what type of recording this is that you gave to Autostakkert. And there are 2 options. It's either a surface recording or a planetary recording. And this has to do with how the image is stabilized in Autostakkert. Planetary recordings are usually, pretty much always, a planet surrounded by black space, and there's a center of gravity measurement, the COG that you see here, that is used to center the planet throughout the recording. So if the recording was not aligned to begin with, these days most recordings are of planets because Fire Capture and other capture software can already do that. But if it's not the case, then it can do the alignment for you. And yeah, planet works on planets very reliably. Surface recordings work on solar recordings and lunar recordings, and also the deep sky recordings. I will show you that later. Simple option, the dynamic background text checkbox that you find here. If you hover over the most options in Autostakkert, you can get a little description of what it does. So this has to do with the way on how Autostakkert discriminates the planet in the recording from the background value. If it's automatic, if it's checked, then it will look at the peak histogram value and assumes that that is the black space surrounding the planet, and then any value above that will be used for the center of gravity measurement. If you have very tricky recordings, you can play with a manual threshold setting to see what works best. For example, if the sky background is very bright during daylight recordings, you might want to switch this off and do a manual threshold. For now, though, I will have it on dynamic background extraction because that will, or dynamic background, because that will work 99.9% of the time, particularly for nighttime recordings, it will work always. Then immediately we get to the most important setting probably in Autostakkert, and that is quite often overlooked. Let me quickly show a previous version of Autostakkert next to Autostakkert 4, because I made a few changes here. Autostakkert 3 had the Laplacian filter as like the default quality estimator in Autostakkert, and that's a way to determine which frame or which part of each frame is sharp and which part is not so sharp. The Laplacian operator is really good for this. It's used in different fields, also scientifically. It's like proven to be quite a reliable quality estimator. It's not the only one out there. It's not always the best, but it's super fast and it's very good to being the best. So that's why I'm using that. It is still using that in Autostakkert 4. So even though it's you cannot select it anymore, I just removed or I just made it the default setting in Autostakkert 4. The other quality estimator is just not as good as the Laplacian, so I removed it. This is something that I try to do more often, by the way, when I'm working on the software. In the last couple of months, I have had some time to work on it. I prefer to take options away instead of adding more options, because I think that it is in 99.9% the best option out there. So I don't take it away if I know that there are recordings that really need it. But in this case, I was pretty certain that you don't need the non-Laplacian quality estimator that was used if you uncheck that checkbox.
I think something like that is quite important that you've taken it out, because it's removed a layer of complication, because I think the quality estimator is the part that trips everybody up the most. Yeah. And I'm glad you've actually addressed that and removed the front end, for lack of a better description. So the end user is not as overwhelmed with something that they don't necessarily understand, even though it's doing it in the background.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say that it is, so I replaced it with now like an automatic setting, which takes care of setting the noise robust value automatically for you, as well as some other settings behind the scene. I will close Autostakkert 3 now because it's a bit in the way. But it's difficult to automate lots of stuff. There are always border cases that don't work quite well. So you have to be very careful on when you remove settings and when you need to keep them. So don't worry, there's still plenty of settings to play with and to try and squeeze the best out of your
break the program more like.
For sure. You are good at that, I just found out. So the so right now I have a new checkbox there that says automatic, which tries to set the noise robust value for you. I will explain what that noise robust value actually does. You can tune it from number 2 to the number 8, a little bit arbitrary, but depending on the type of recordings that you feed the software, a higher or lower value gives you better results. A lower value is good for recordings that are very high quality, so that the image data that goes in has very low noise and the seeing was reasonably good, or at least reasonably good, and it will not, or it will focus on small features in each frame to determine what the quality was like. So actually what it does is a noise robust value of 2 will bin the image 2 by 2 before it calculates that Laplacian of the image. Value of 3 will bin it 3 by 3, value of 4 will bin it 4 by 4. Basically, you're selecting the scale of the features to look at. Some data is always worse than other data. Blue channel data is pretty much always worse than green and red channel data. And infrared, which is quite often the best because it's less affected by seeing. But that means that blue channel data often can use a higher noise robust value than green and red channel data, just because there aren't that many very fine features in there. It's not always the case, but it's often the case. So sometimes the seeing is really good, and then in principle you have better resolution possible with blue channel data than green and red channel data, but that's very often not the case. So right now the automatic setting does a little trick in that it also uses, I say how it works. The automatic setting will look at the frame and determine how much noise is in the frame. And based on that, it makes an estimation of which noise robust value will work most likely the best for your kind of data. I've already seen a few examples on my own data where it doesn't give me the very best results. And I'm sure that will be more the case. The more data you feed it, the more mistakes will show up. This is something I'm still working and still trying to find something that is robust and working most of the time. But what it does is it set that noise robust value, and it also set a value under advanced experimental features. It played with the pre-processing. It applies a small Gaussian blur to the image to basically get rid of the very fine noise that is in the image, which allows the Laplacian operator to work better. It does not always use it. It uses it depending on how much noise it finds in the image, but in this case, it thinks that by pre-processing, I will get better results than by not using pre-processing. So I set it to automatic and I keep it to automatic. And there are two more options under the quality estimator. And this is probably a case where I might get rid of one, but I will not, because I know that there are a few examples where global is preferable to local. Local means that it will calculate the quality for each alignment point that we place in the image. And I haven't covered alignment points yet, but here are a few alignment points that I put on Jupyter. I randomly do not copy this. The local quality estimator will mean that for this alignment point here, it will calculate the quality throughout all the frames, and it will do the same for this, and it will do the same for this, and the same for this. And every little alignment point will get its own set of frames to that are best for that particular alignment point. So it can be that with just a couple of alignment points there, and you process the recording that, and you say that you want to stack the best 50% of the frames, that in the end it will actually use data from all the frames that are in the recording, just because it so happens that for this particular alignment point, frame number 1 was good, but for this particular alignment point, frame number 2 was good, which wasn't good for this one, etc. If you set that noise robust value to global, it will take the quality estimator that the quality number that is assigned to the entire frame for each alignment point. So every alignment point will use the exact same set of frames to stack. Generally, you don't want that because there's a lot of information to gain by letting every alignment point decide for itself which frames are better. But for example, when transparency is very poor, you might get lots of artifacts if you leave it on local, because some frames are darker than other frames for a particular alignment point, and then you can get like weird seam artifacts between the images. Oof, I need a sip of water. So local is best in 99% of the times. There are a few times when you want to use the global quality estimator, but pretty much stick to local most of the time. The next step is analyze the data. And analyzing the data will let Autostakkert go through all the frames, sort them, and show us which frame is the best one, which is this one, and which frame is the worst one, which is the end of the list. So it sorted the frames for us. And you can clearly see that the best frame has the sharpest features out there, shows most detail, and the worst one is really quite blurry. The quality graph will show that. So let's go all the way to the left. This is the very best frame, and it has a quality of 100%. But that is a scaling that I perform. It's just the quality value of 4,000, whatever there's behind that, 40,000. Raw value doesn't matter, but the 100% stands for the best frame, and the 0% is the worst frame. So the quality graph is always scaled between the best frame and the worst frame, meaning that if there is like a weird outlier frame that has some sharp artifact in there, this quality graph will be skewed a lot, with the line going something like this, if you follow my cursor, with most of the frames below the average line that is there. What I'm trying to say is that the quality graph gives you an indication, but you always have to be wary of what the frames actually look like. So I suggest to see that the first frame is indeed the best frame, check that the last frame is indeed the last frame, the worst frame, and if that's the case, then you can use that quality graph to decide how many frames you want to stack, for example. So there are a few different ways to do that, and it's a bit tricky. I don't know the best way. Some people prefer to stack fewer frames, and others prefer to stack like at least half of the frames for planetary recordings. What is an indication, a quite rough indication, is the point where the quality of the frames drops below the 50% line. So at this point, this is the cutoff point where half of the frames, where the best 39% of the frames has a quality of 50% or higher, and the worst 61% of the frames have a quality of 50% or lower. Usually I stick to kind of that 50% line. In general, though, I quite often, for planets, Jupiter, Saturn, I know that I at least want to have 50% of the frames stacked. For surface recordings, and especially for high quality surface recordings like lunar images or solar images with a high signal to noise ratio, you will see that you will have a very sharp peak in the beginning, and that cutoff point is way closer to there, that you're more likely to stack 10-11% of the frames. You can click in. Yeah.
Real quick question here is, how does the software determine the quality of a frame? What exactly is it looking at?
Okay, so that's again that same quality estimator. So again, that same, it's binning the images 4x4. It is in this case doing that pre-processing, so that's slight Gaussian blurring, and then calculating the Laplacian. And the Laplacian is like searching for edges in the image, more or less.
So is it going to be contrast detection or phase detection?
It's pretty much contrast detection, yes.
Okay.
Okay, one thing I hadn't shown is you can, and that's also an undocumented feature, if you hold Control and you click in the quality graph, it will set that frame percentage to stack for you automatically.
You're giving away all the secrets.
Well, that was the plan, right?
Yeah, no, it is. I'm kidding.
Okay, so for now I will I will go with my own instinct and say I want to stack 50% of the frames, which is the difference between stacking the best 50% and the best 37% isn't huge. Huh? It's a small difference. Your post-processing will have a much bigger effect on the outcome than stacking a few frames more or less. It's only like when you're doubling the number of frames that you stack that you really start to see increase or decrease of noise and big changes in outcome that you can get. But like 55%, 40%, yeah, it's not a big difference. Okay, so we analyzed the recording. We set to stack the best 50% of the frames by holding Control and clicking in this graph. I will go back to the reference frame afterwards. I will tell you how you can make multiple stacks in one go. So you see a bunch of text boxes here. And the top row of text boxes are to define if you want to stack like a fixed number of frames. Say you want to stack the best 100 frames, the best 500 frames, and the best 1000 frames. And then you fill in those numbers and it will generate image stacks for the best 100, 500, and 1000 in the same processing run. It won't take much more time, but it allows you to quickly see what works better for my recordings. What happens if I only stack the best 10%, and what happens if I only stack the best 20% or whatever. So the top row was for the absolute number of frames that you can select, and the bottom row is for the percentage of frames that you can stack. I will empty the top one, and for fun, we'll just put in some random numbers at the bottom. So I will stack the best 50% of the frames, 20, 10, and 5. Back to the option below, analyze, there's reference frame. And reference frame is, so what the software does is try to compare features on the planet to where they are supposed to be, and trying to put them back in the place where they are supposed to be. So if you go through this video a little bit, and I'm just moving the browser, you can see that it wobbles a bit. And again, this is very high quality data, so it doesn't wobble that much, but it wobbles a little bit. And if you don't put everything back where it's supposed to be, then your image will be blurry. So you need to have like the reference frame onto which you align everything. And the reference frame, just having one single frame is not a good reference frame, which is why the reference frame is actually a reference stack. And it's probably a good idea to change reference frame to reference stack. I will do that for the next version. So the reference stack is made up of the best, typically the best 50% of the frames, or the frames that are above this cutoff line that I just discussed. So the best 37% of frames it will use to create the reference frame. And even though it's a bit blurry, it will have very good estimate of where everything is. And that's the most important for the reference frame. It doesn't matter that it's slightly blurry, as long as more or less this feature here can still be detected. And this feature here can still be detected. I don't care how sharp it is. You just need to have the position of it correctly. So you can let Autostakkert choose itself how many frames to use for this reference frame, or you can set a manual size. Auto size is good 99% of the times, but there are a few cases where you want to say, well, I want to use as many frames as possible for the reference frame because, for example, the seeing is very bad and I just recorded a really short video, meaning that there's, if I only use the best 10% of the frames, then the reference frame is still going to be distorted. Well, if you use more frames, then that reference frame will be on average, or will be average more, so less distorted. You know better where the features are. This becomes especially important if you're going to make animations, for example, where you will see that positions of features are not exactly where they are supposed to be. If you compare one recording to a next recording and you can see slight wobble of features on Jupiter in vertical direction, then you know something is wrong and the reference frame probably wasn't good. This is mostly the case for surface recordings, for solar recordings especially. There I often use a manual size that is slightly higher than what the automatic size would suggest. Maybe not often, sometimes I do that. Depends on how long my recordings were. For now though, I will set it to auto size because that works most of the time. The feature double stack reference, that means that it will go process the recording twice, basically. It will process the recording, analyze the frames, create a reference frame of the best 37% of the frames, create the image stack, and then use that image stack as input for the next processing run as the new reference frame. This can help, especially when you were stacking only or only the best 5% or best 10% of the frames to begin with. There might be a big, I just said that the reference frame, it doesn't matter that it's blurry, but for those recordings, it will matter a little bit, and it might lose track for very small features if you do not use this double stack reference option. So pretty much for all solar recordings, I would recommend to use the double stack reference option. And even for very high planetary recordings, I would use it. It doubles your processing time, but if it's if you can afford that, if the recording is not too big, then I would use the double stack reference option. So I will put that on now. Let's go look at my notes to see where I was. I will go to a menu option right now and show you the memory usage menu. There are two options in Autostakkert 4. One is no buffering and one is adaptive buffering. If your computer does not have lots of memory and you notice that the software is crashing quite a bit, try running the processing with the no buffering option. That will mean that Autostakkert will try its best to use as little memory as possible. It can still use quite a lot depending on which settings you use, but it will not buffer all the images in memory. So it can help you still process very big files, for example. That option is basically there because the adaptive buffering option that I think it's new in Autostakkert 4. Let me quickly check. Oh no, it was new in 3.1.4. It was there already as well. But in an option before that, it wasn't called adaptive buffering. It was just called buffering. I try to make the buffering smart in that it will, as soon as it sees that it will run out of memory, it will free a certain number of frames again and will continue processing. It's not perfect yet. It's very difficult to do this optimally. It's easy to use too much memory. So typically, adaptive buffering is the best option to be. If you run into memory issues, go for no buffering and see if that processes your recording. Okay, the color menu. So Autostakkert can work with different types of recordings. Personally, I for planetary imaging, I only use monochrome cameras because on average that gives best results. It's a bit more work, but you have more resolution in the end. So I use that, but it has an option to auto detect which type of video you are giving to Autostakkert, which works most of the time, but not always, especially for some difficult Bayer patterns, it might not be obvious for Autostakkert to detect the correct one, in which case you should play with these options to see which one gives you the right colors in your image, which should not be too difficult.
If you guys don't know which Bayer matrix that you have, check up with the manufacturer to figure out what they are. So if you're using a ZWO QHY or Starlight Express, they all have their Bayer matrix profiles set. If you're using DSLRs, on the other hand, or mirrorless cameras, you will have to just double, triple, quadruple check. So, for example, if you're using a Fujifilm-based camera, it's going to be red, green, green, blue. But every camera has a different Bayer matrix. So if you guys get weird problems, double check that. So always check up with the manufacturer. They do give you this information.
Okay, I found that like most cameras, ZWO cameras that I've used that are color cameras, the RGB one is, I think,
it's the most common one.
Yep.
Or pretty much any Sony chip is RGB.
Okay, then I will ignore this for now. I will go focus on putting alignment points in there. Together with the...
Hold on, before you gloss over that, image calibration, are you going to refer to that at any point?
Of course. I have my huge list of things that I will discuss. So at some point I will discuss that. And also the advanced options I will mention. I think I will pretty much do everything.
Oh, okay.
I will try.
We might need more than 2 hours now.
Okay, I can do this. So let's go back to the window on the right here. So so I use this to show the frames and to show the best frame and the worst frame. But I also use this window to place the alignment points in. And there are two ways to place alignment points. One is to do it manually, left click, and right click to delete alignment points. But that becomes quite tedious if your planet is big, or if you have a lunar recording, that's impossible. So the other option is to place alignment points in a grid. And there are a few settings that you can tweak to make that grid. But the most important one is the minimal brightness one, which just says that exclude anything where the brightness is below this threshold in the image. So if I place it on 20, then it will not go on the black space, but it will focus mostly on inside the planet. I will increase it a little bit because I want to have the alignment points a little bit further from the edge. Why I want to do that? Okay, so alignment points you want to place on features in the image, and you want these features you should be able to track these features throughout the entire recording. Most features that you can see by eye are good features. So you can see this oval right here, which is very clear to see in the raw frames, which means that an alignment point right on top of that oval would give a very sharp or very good tracking for that particular location in the image. But the more you go towards the edges, and especially the more you, for a planet like Jupiter here, we're not talking about the rings of Saturn, for example, but the brightness of Jupiter is highest in the center of the image and goes dimmest towards the edges. Meaning that features towards the edges are more difficult to track than features that are facing us. Also, if an alignment point is placed too much over the edge, the predominant feature in this case is the edge itself, and it can trace the edge perfectly in this direction. In this direction. So it can see where the planet begins here and where the dark area is on this side, but it will not make a big distinction between the alignment box here and the alignment box in slightly different positions. From the point of view of that alignment point, it would look very similar, which means that these kind of alignment points are not in a good location. You want to have them slightly more on the planet where the features are instead of on the edge where it will focus more on the edge. So one way to do that is to tweak that minimal brightness to make sure that I don't want anything right here. I want something here. So I want the minimal brightness to be 50 in this case, something like that, where the alignment points are placed nicely on the planet. A little bit over the edge is okay, but not too much. Another option here is the multi-scale option. If I don't have that selected, it will just produce a grid of alignment points of the same size. But Autostakkert can try to be clever and use different sized alignment points, and it will almost double the alignment point size and then double it again, more or less, and put multiple of those sizes on the image. And that means that the bigger the alignment point, the easier it is to track, because there are more features inside that big alignment point compared to a small alignment point. So whenever there's a small alignment point that doesn't work well, Autostakkert will use the information from a bigger alignment point that is over that same area, that's covering that same area. There's not really a case where I can think of that you should not use this. It will make processing a little bit longer, but on average the results will be better because there's always one small alignment point on an edge where there's just not that much features to track on, and that will cause like a blurry area in your image, where if you had a larger alignment point on top of that, then it can use that information to repair that alignment point that isn't working properly. So the size of the alignment point is something that is super important. Unfortunately, that is really difficult to automate. It's similar to automate than that noise robust value, meaning that noise is the noise level in the image determines how small your smallest alignment point can be. But seeing effects plays a big role as well, and this is really something that you should play with. Meaning that for the recordings that I shot during this night, I made I don't know, we made like 20 different recordings of Jupiter in each filter, so we have a lot of data to work with. Before you process everything, go sit with one recording that is one of the best that you've seen, where the seeing was pretty good, and just use different alignment points and see what the results will be. If you use alignment points that are too small, it will produce a blurry result, and you will have artifacts. Even with the multi-scale option, it will not cover everything. So never choose alignment points that are too small, because you will not have optimal results, but you only know that after trying it. But it will not change much from one recording to the next. I mean, for one night, you have found that this size, the 72 size, works best. Then you can process all the recordings of that night with that setting.
So yeah, I knew this was going to start something, because it's the prime example of all these questions is to do with these alignment point and the sizes. I've got to admit, I don't generally use multi-scale because I've used it before in the past because I do a lot of solar images. What I found here is the smaller sizes create the best stabilization for me. But interestingly, it's always the opposites for everybody.
But it depends a lot on the type of image that you feed it for. For my solar recordings that I did, and that's some time ago already, but those are such high signal to noise ratio images. I mean, there's so many very fine details there that you will find that the very smallest alignment point is probably the best. Although 24 is maybe pushing it, but like 32 or something is in that ballpark, you're probably having the best. But for planetary images, the noise level is much higher. It hardly ever makes sense to use those small alignment points in those conditions.
Right. So for you guys watching at home, if you're looking at finer detail, then the smaller sizes generally are the better ways to go. Obviously, if you have a planet that is, say, a tenth of the size of this in terms of the capture size, then having one massive alignment point doesn't make any logical sense. I mean, he's got an image here that is covers a large surface area. I mean, when you've got 640 by 624, most people's images are like 320 by 320. So you have to use a little bit of common sense here. Yeah. Having alignment points of 72 plus may be way too big because it encompasses the entire planet. So you need to kind of scale down accordingly. It is the way to look at it. And for some of you other guys who are doing solar photography, wondering why your surface features are shot, but your prominences are not, that's what he was referring to with doing the alignment points in terms of the minimum maximum brightness level. If your alignment points do not cover the prominences, then it will not align to that data, which is why most of the time you get this blurry mess. So if you actually lower the minimum brightness to a number where when you do the auto placement of the grid, it does cover that part.
And another tip for that is that you can manually add some of your own alignment points. If the prominence is here, then you can add some extra alignment points there and even use a bigger size of alignment points for those.
Yes.
It's much darker there. It's difficult to track. So use some bigger manually placed alignment points.
But I think the most important thing for you guys at home is experiment using alignment points. We can't give you a set rule. There is not a magical button. I mean, Emil's done a really good job doing a magical button as it is doing the place alignment grid, but you still have to have common sense. You still have to do some manual processing, I guess, in placing these alignment points if you're having problematic areas.
Yeah, for sure. What might be fun is to try just very small alignment points in this run and look at them and see if you can spot the difference between two small ones and two big ones.
We're not going to do that now. It's going to take too long.
I'm super fast.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, let's quickly go for it. I will switch off that multi-scale feature. I will take just one stack and I will make it kind of small, and I will not do a double run. I will make the stack small so that it's easier to spot the differences. I will only use the very sharpest frames. Oh, I did not show this yet. That's for later. I will use some larger ones now.
And you've made a massive improvement to the engine because it's moving real fast.
Yeah, that's we discussed briefly before we were live. So the Autostakkert 4, the biggest improvement is on processing speed, and especially for very large recordings. I made sure that it was working fast for like huge service recordings or lunar recordings that were 40 gigabytes in size. That should be much faster now. I will quickly process these like super quickly and not really paying attention to what it looks like. Okay, so
I see what's going on. Left-hand side about just below the halfway line, I can see a bunch of line artifacts disappearing and appearing.
Yeah, okay, this is the one where we used a lot of alignment points, so the really small alignment points, not these, but whatever it was, something like this. And you can see some weird wiggles here. The edge of Jupiter here is not correct. In this one, I unclicked that one. This is the one where we used the larger alignment points, and you see no mistakes throughout the entire field of view as far as I can see. Yeah, it's sharper pretty much all over the place. Not everywhere though. There are a few areas where the very small alignment points work better. In the center of Jupiter, I can see some areas where the contrast is higher due to the smaller features, but definitely near the edges, it's not working well. This is only something that you spot if you overprocess your recording and go in detail at it and really stare at it and flip between
Which is
them.
what everybody is doing right now.
It's people should do this more if they want to trust their data. It's super easy to make like a weird line near the edge of Jupiter between alignment points that are not following something, and then it may look like a feature that is real, while in fact it's just a stacking artifact.
Yeah, I can see some of the bands there are really struggling there.
Yeah, but it's subtle. Huh? It's not super clear. I mean,
no,
you know it, and then you know where to look for it. But to get the very best results, you need to do this. And this data is very high quality data. So
right, to begin with.
Kind of get away with rather small ones. It would be a bigger difference if I had used another recording. It would have lost track of the features much.
So let's have a look at the multiscale this time now.
Okay. So the multiscale, I forgot how many frames I used or the size of my alignment points, but this is a nice bridge into a new feature in version 3. For every stack that I have done, it will create a .as3 file, which is like a session file, which contains, sorry about that, which contains the information of how the, I can't open it right now, but it contains information on how this particular image here, this particular image here was created. So by opening this session file, it will open the original video file. It will show you where the alignment points were, and you can all the settings are as they were that created that stack.
So now I can actually go back and troubleshoot the areas that.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's I've never done that before.
This is a nice feature in where you can also, if you run into a problem and that's you want to show me that problem, you can send me the video and you send me that AS3 file, and I know exactly what you did to make that to do that processing. So apparently I used the size of 32, and I will now use the multiscale thing, and I keep everything the same. So this is multiscale. That free field is something that will be added to the image stack name. Whenever I'm debugging or trying stuff out, I will type something here that makes me remember what I was doing. So now there's an image here, multiscale. I open that, place it on top of the other ones. Okay, this is the multiscale one. This is 32, and this was 72 or something like that, I think. Okay, so the multiscale one, yeah, it seems that it fixed the recording pretty well, actually.
Yeah, it even fixed the issue down in the bottom left-hand corner that I was looking at.
I don't see what issue you were referring to.
There's a black line. Well, without me showing you where it is.
Yeah.
I know where it is.
But for sure at the top in that area, you can see that there's something weird going on with the edge, but it's fixed with the multi-alignment points or multi-size. I'm pretty happy with this, actually. Didn't know it would work that well. So really depending on the quality of the data, you can go quite low apparently with the alignment point size, as long as you have multi-scale to fix whatever went wrong. Having said that, I would not go crazy low. Test it out and look in detail at what you did to really confirm that it is making sense. And it's probably best to test it out without that multi-scale feature on, maybe. I don't know. You can test it in both ways. I guess just leave it on, but look closely at your data. That's the only way how you can get like the best results in general.
I think we've started something now. Everyone's going to go back and start reprocessing their old data now, going, oh, that's what I've been doing wrong all this time.
Oh, that's one of the things they have been doing wrong. So one more thing, instead of just having rectangular alignment points, and I'm left clicking and right clicking to add them, you can use the mouse, the scroll wheel to change the size of the alignment point. So you don't have to click there. You can just scroll to make it bigger and scroll down to make it smaller, just to help you set large alignment points manually and remove them again, and yeah, make it easier to do that. And there's an option to, like, if you want an alignment point of a particular size or shape for whatever reason, you can do that. It's not often useful, but it is there. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a square alignment point. It can be any rectangle.
I'll give you guys at home an example of how that's useful. If you guys don't really know this, I do a lot of imaging of the ISS. That is where it's going to be super, super useful, depending on the angle and the tilt of the ISS. If you guys are doing stacking with the ISS and you find that it tears apart, that's actually a really good method of fixing that, is to draw your own rectangle for the ISS. It works really, really nicely.
Okay. Also, in that case, keep your recordings that you let Autostakkert process quite short. I mean, if it's changing the angle during what Autostakkert is trying to do, you will not get optimal results, of course.
Yeah. Well, we're only doing like 5 or 6 frames, if that.
Yeah. Are you manually tracking or?
Yeah, well, we're using a Dobsonian to try and
nice.
chase the ISS. It's not easy. There's a guy that's in London. His name's Sabi. He does space station guys. He does it by hand. The way he does it is just unbelievable. So he does it all by hand, and he uses Autostakkert. And it's one of the tricks that he showed me, is to manually draw the alignment point, because it's not the movement of the ISS. It's when you get 5 frames in a row. What happens here is when you have seeing, when you get an alignment point, because the ISS is so small, if you draw your own manual alignment point, it'll look in that one area and so forth down as you work your way through the whole thing. So when it recombines the image, it doesn't want to twist, if that makes sense.
Okay, cool.
And it works. So ever since he showed me that, I was like, well, damn, I should have known that earlier.
It's been a long time since I've imaged the ISS, but I've done it and tried to do it manually as well with like a 25 centimeter Newtonian, and then you miss 99.9% of the time because the chip is too small, and it's lots of fun, but it's the processing afterwards was interesting. I had some hidden features in Autostakkert to let me extract manually the frames where something was visible, blah, blah, blah. It's nice. Okay. Oh yeah, a few cool things I want to show that are still on the main window of Autostakkert. So I opened a file from this folder, and there's just one file open. There are a few little buttons underneath the open button, and this allows you to open the previous file. And there's a typo here. Open the previous file in the current working directory, or open the next file in the current working directory, or open all files in the current working directory. And
this is new.
This is new in 3.1.4 for sure. I don't know if it was in 3.0.
Yeah. It wasn't. I've never seen that.
Okay, so this is okay. It's kind of new, yes. But what this does is allow you to quickly go through multiple recordings or all the recordings that you made in a particular day. But something super fun is that there's a checkbox next to it, and it shows the filter of the currently open video, and it extracts that information from the fire capture log file. And you can like limit it to open all files in that folder with the infrared 685 filter, and then it has opened all 15 files in this folder that have this same filter. meaning that you can easily process all of those files in one go with the same settings. So that's kind of fun.
Would this option also be suitable for red, green, blue values?
Yeah, for sure. Let's see if I have something here.
Oh, look, yes.
So this is all the red files in there. Now I uncheck that box, it goes to the green and it shows me that this is a blue one. I want all the blue ones. It will open all the blue in that folder. So this is a nice way to browse through your data a bit. And process all the ones with the same filter in the same way, which is probably what you want to do because, like I said, totally. The blue files need a different setting than green and red ones, generally speaking. So yes, those are explained. There's another fun feature there, two features there, that is limit and expand. And what that does is I'll open a very big file to play with. Let's open a big moon. And this is a file, recording of the moon that I made, and I put it on service recording because it is a service recording. I zoom out a little bit because it's quite big. But this one is, how big is it? Like 40 gigabytes or something. And sometimes you just want to play with a specific part of the data in a very big recording. And the limit option allows you to select, like, I only want to look at the first 1000 frames. And then it opened the file as if it had only 1000 frames in there. You can choose your own window of frames that you want to use. So from 1000 to 3000. And it will open the 2000 frames that are in that interval. So this can be useful if your recording is super big and you want to pay close attention to a small part in your recording only. Another option that is kind of fun is the expand option. And the expand one will pretend that the currently open recording is not just one recording, but is actually multiple recordings. It's multiple recordings from the minimum to the maximum frame. I keep it as something very large because I want to include all the frames. And I want to pretend like it's a recording that consists of 1000 frames, where there's 500 frames in between those 1000 frame intervals. And this will kind of break up your recording into, in this case, 36 recordings that are each 1000 frames in length, but in a running window of 500 frames separated.
So just so I understand this, with the expanded, that means I can record, say, like a really, really long file, we'll say, I don't know, 1 million frames for argument's sake, create a bunch of small ones, and then export each one out and create like an animation through those 1 million
Exactly.
frames.
This is super useful for making animations, and this is nice for making animations that are very smooth instead of having, I mean, the fact that you can have like a little overlap between the different windows that you have will make the animation super smooth. So yes, definitely, this is for animation building stuff, and also for International Space Station. When the viewing angle changes, you can use this to make sure that it has only, I mean, you need to have a tracking telescope then, that you have like continuous movement or continuous video of the ISS. But this will ensure that you will only stack frames that are more or less having the same orientation of the ISS within the frame. And then you can make a nice little animation out of that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, this is a nice option. You don't use it that often, but there are a few cases where it can be nice.
I'm gonna use it to death.
Good luck. Don't break it too much.
Just as long as it works.
Okay, so that was that one. I'll see if I missed something on the main screen of the software. Yeah, there's one There are a few little logos here. One will say the type of Autostakkert is processing this data as if it's a monochrome, indicating by this grayscale Bayer pattern kind of thing that you see there. If I had it on RGB, it will show me an RGB Bayer pattern. It's just like a visual reminder of which color setting you are using right now. There is a little logo that shows that FFmpeg is found in the current working directory of Autostakkert, which means that whenever it opens a video file that it does not recognize by itself, and pretty much all compressed video files that come from a DSLR camera or a mobile phone. If you place FFmpeg.exe, so you need a statically built FFmpeg executable, and you place that. Oops, let me see if I can find the directory. So here I have an executable of FFmpeg next to Autostakkert, and then it will use FFmpeg to convert the files on the fly. Well, not on the fly, before opening them in Autostakkert, whenever it cannot open it by itself. One thing is that it can use detect.exe. Detect, it's software. Do you know what detect is?
I do. I don't know if everybody else does.
Can you give a nice short summary while I drink this glass of water?
Hold on. It might be better if I do this.
Okay, so detect is it's written by Mark Delcroix, or maybe not started by him, but I think it's started by him. It is software to detect impacts on Jupiter and Saturn.
Yeah, I'm trying to find his website. How does he spell his software again?
Detect. It's
no, didn't he stylize it?
Yeah, the DETE, the capital D, capital T, capital C. But he is like gathering.
No, this is it. I think this is it. So I'm just gonna put something over the screen real fast.
Okay.
This is basically what this program is. I'm not 100% sure if this is the official site because I don't recognize this site, but yeah, he has a really weird way of stylizing it. So it basically looks for bright impact changes, and I don't know how else to describe it. It is just like using all these other programs.
I have his website up now, but I don't know if that's his latest one. I think it's part of People. I think this is like the latest, the best website.
Oh, okay. We were looking at the same thing then.
Yeah. So it's software to detect impacts on Jupiter, potentially Saturn. And there have been like a handful of impacts being detected, maybe slightly more than one handful now. But and there's a study going on by scientists to see how often this actually happens. And amateurs are much encouraged to help with this. Because amateurs are watching the planets pretty much continuously, way more often than the professionals do. And every now and then, an impact is detected, and you can be one that detects it with your data. So it's fun, and it's super scientifically useful as well. So I highly recommend to have a look there if you image Jupiter and Saturn regularly to use this software, so that they can build a big database of how often something like this happens. And even if you detect nothing, that's still super useful. It's relevant data to see how, say you have 20 hours of video, then you know that at least during those 20 hours of video, nothing happened, which is as useful as knowing that you detected something or not. So have a look there. But Autostakkert, or this new version, will work together with Detect. And you pointed to the Detect executable from the website we just showed, the default website where you can download it. And it will, after processing the videos in Autostakkert, will send it to a queue that detects monitors, and it will scan the video files for impacts. So
I mean, what the software does, just so you guys understand, is it's like a high contrast filter that it runs on the planet, and all it does is it looks for bright spots appearing and then going away. Is essentially the only way I can describe it. I mean, I've tried it, but I have no footage that shows any impact, so I have no idea if it ever works or not.
no, but like I said, even that is very useful information. So there's still a small manual step involved, I think, where it creates an image where you need to verify if what the software saw is actually really an impact or not, because there are some false detections, of course.
Yeah, hot pixels, whatever.
Exactly, or a moon that is affected quite a lot by seeing effects, for example. But yeah, it's a really fun project, and it's really useful to participate with this. So Autostakkert can do that, or can help with this, and send all the videos automatically to detect after it has processed the videos in Autostakkert.
Is there any reason why you made the icon look like the Death Star?
There's like a mini impact right there. You see a hot pixel.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Oh, it looks more like Death Star.
I think I copied. I'm not sure if I might have made it based on an existing icon. I don't know. Death Star is fun. It's good.
Good enough.
Oh yeah, there's a little up-down thingy where you can select how many threads you want the software to use. By default, it is set such that it will use all the threads that your processor has. And this laptop here has 8 cores, but it does hyperthreading, so it says it has 16 threads that it can work at the same time. And that will significantly speed up processing if you let it use everything that there is. But there might be cases where you want to use the computer as well at the same time with something else. So you can limit the amount of threads that it uses so that your computer doesn't become too unresponsive. Yeah. Typically, I just have it set to maximum, and I can still work whatever I want in the background. There are some output options here that I haven't discussed yet. So the little column here says you can click on this and you can say, I want to create automatically TIFF files, in this case, because I have TIFF files selected, that are either containing are made of red, green, and blue channels in there. Even though if it's a grayscale recording, you can force it to always use an RGB image output. Some software needs that. Or you let it be on automatic and it will create monochrome files for monochrome videos and RGB files for RGB videos. You can save as PNG files or TIFF. These are all lossless and or uncompressed. You can right-click on TIFF and have a few options on what kind of TIFF files you want to save. By default, it's an uncompressed one. You can set it to a lossless one. Uncompressed is just a little bit faster. So if you're processing a lot of files, it's easier for the software to write uncompressed ones, but it's a small difference. There's no difference in image quality. You can also create 32-bit channel output. By default, TIFF and PNG are 16 bits and FITs are 32 bits, but you can force the TIFF files to have 32-bit per channel as well. Hardly ever is there a use case for that, but you don't know. Might be useful. There's no hidden option for PNG and there's no hidden option for FITs. Yeah, there's an option to have a sharpened output. And this will apply a non-sharp mask to the image tag and will blend in the raw image stack as well for 50%. If you you don't want to blend in the raw image stack, you set that to 0% and you get the most sharpened file. I don't use this much, but it can be nice to like quickly see which videos are good and which are not good to get an idea of the data that you captured, or to find out on which videos during a session you really want to focus because those are sharper than other ones, for example. By default, it will save outputs in folders. So let's go to where it puts some outputs. So this is a directory where I have the original recordings, and there's a text file that says something about the recording, which Firecapture created. And within that folder, then you have folders. You can see I've been messing around with the data a lot. But within this file, you have folders that say how many percentage of frames you have stacked. ASP75 is you stacked 75% of the frame. This is the best 50% of the frames. So depending on the settings that you use here, it will create a folder for that. Then I will quickly go over these output options. So there's a button here, output options. You can find here the detect software again. You can send the stack to Registux if Registux is open at the same time, and it will immediately go to the wavelet processing stage page of Registux. For every stack that Autostakkert generates, you could send it to an open Photoshop instance, or you could open it in Windows Photo Viewer. So for every stack that you create, you quickly see what it looks like in one of these software packages. And you can determine what you want to name your files exactly, or how you want to name your files. So you can determine the name of the folders in which the files are saved. Not super interesting, but for people that like playing with this kind of data, the option exists. Now for something more interesting, the advanced settings here. There is, by default, it's processing the data as is, the same image scale, just one by one, and it will not try to increase the resolution in whatever way. But there are a few techniques implemented that allow you to try and increase the resolution. The most efficient one is Drizzle technique, which really helps in certain cases to increase resolution. And resampling allows you to get slightly higher image scale and sometimes slightly better stacking results as well. I would only use these settings for very high quality data where you actually might see the difference between using this and and not using this. But I will try to show now with one video where I use Drizzle to see to see that the resolution actually increases, so that I can get better results with it. And I will do that by a solar image that I took back in 2011. And this is the video that I will try to process. You can see seeing is quite good in my eyes, in that there are certain areas in the frames where you can see the granulation. Let me see if I can improve it a little bit or make it a bit bigger. You can see the granulation quite clearly in raw frames, and in other areas you can't see it, but you can see like a checker or a pattern on the image where you can see the focus kind of move throughout the image everywhere. So this data is quite undersampled, which means that I didn't use a very high magnification for this, which means that it is a good candidate for the drizzling technique to try and get some more resolution out of it. I will quickly process this. It's a surface recording. I set it to, this is a setting I haven't touched yet, to crop, which means that I will want the video or the final output file only to contain data that was visible throughout the entire recording. If I set it to expand, it will try to make the output file bigger or as big as possible, but it will mean that the edges will be made up of fewer frames. So back to crop. The improved tracking one is not really needed that much anymore in the new version because I've much improved how well it tracks. I haven't discussed one important thing yet, I realize. That's the alignment anchor, the image stabilization anchor. For surface recordings, you need to point it to a feature where it can, that it uses to track the movement of the throughout the entire recording. There's a new option where I'm working on to try and pinpoint a location that is the best one to place it. So this is like automatically selecting from this data. It chooses this area as the best area to place your alignment anchor. It works quite well, but it's not perfect yet. So I'm still improving on that. But you can use Control-click to pick an area in whatever location to decide which feature you want to track. The improved tracking one goes a bit, will search in a larger area for that feature from frame to frame. If there's not much movement from one frame to a next frame, then you don't need it. But if the recording was made during very windy conditions, for example, and the sun is moving in the image a lot, then you might want to try the improved tracking option to make it succeed in tracking all the features there. Back to the drizzling option. I will place quite a lot very small alignment points. I will not do sharpening of the images, and I will say that this is this is not drizzle, this is no drizzle. I'm very good at naming stuff. Usually I enter something like randomly Dutch word blood. But I will create one stack where I did not use drizzle, and I will create one stack where I did use drizzle. And you can see that processing or the stacking phase goes quite a bit slower when you're drizzling. That's because it's like upscaling the image, in this case 300% in both dimensions. And yeah, that will take a bit longer, but it will try to improve the final resolution. So I now have two images. I will close this. This is the drizzled one. And for this demonstration, I will resize the recording such that they are the same size. And so we can try and look at the difference between drizzling and non-drizzling as best as possible. This one I need to reduce in size. The other one I increased by 150%. This one I will decrease to 50% so that they are both the same size. This is drizzle. This is no drizzle. And I will just quickly sharpen them in a very ugly way, but in an identical way. That is too much. Once more. I often use Photoshop to sharpen the recordings, and I often use this Smart Sharpen feature because it's kind of like deconvolution, but super fast. Okay, and let's add a little layer on top too. Something like that. So just compare the two images. This is the one with drizzling. This is the one without drizzling. I will zoom in a little bit. Without drizzling, with drizzling. It is again super subtle, and drizzling is by nature a little bit more grainy than non-drizzling. But you get the impression that the smallest features are smaller in size in the drizzling stack than in the non-drizzling stack. Differences are again super subtle, but I know that this one is sharper than this one. There's more detail in there in this one because of the drizzling technique. For most planetary images, you can see it a little bit actually at the 150% scale. This one looks a little bit more fat than this one, more finer defined features. Again, differences are super subtle. And if you want to see if it works for your data, you need to try it out. But it's very difficult to compare the drizzled data with non-drizzled data to see which one is actually better. You need to focus, look super closely at the data and see which works best for whatever you are doing. Let's see if there's something else I can say here. Resampling, I don't use that often, but it's a way to create an image that is larger in size without any of the possible artifacts that you can get with drizzling. Drizzling is a bit, it's tricky to work with drizzled data. And resampled data is sometimes smoother to work with and less artifacts, but not as high quality results you can get as you can get with Drizzle.
All right, we've got about 10 more minutes left, and then we need to open up for Q&A, and I have to really go to the bathroom, and my cat's decided to come alive and step on everything. So you guys at home start putting your questions in now, and you've literally got 10 minutes left to go through the advanced features and the image calibration.
Awesome. That's plenty of time. Okay, I'll do my best. Let's go back to the A recording. First, image calibration. Image calibration is easy. There are, I want to open a recording first. This one. This is image data. I will make it a little bit smaller and a little bit brighter to just see what's going on here. This is some data that I shot with an ASI 174 camera. So this is deep sky data. And you can see that it's kind of rough and that there are some horizontal lines, which is quite typical for CMOS sensors, but you can also see quite clearly the hot pixels in the image that stay at exactly the same location throughout all the images. And you want to use a dark frame to get rid of those. So Autostakkert can use a dark frame, can use a flat frame, and can also use a dead pixel map. Dead pixel map is to really get rid of the pixels that are stuck, that are just dead. You provide it with an image file, and the image file is 0 for all the locations where it should not try to replace the pixel, and is bigger than 0 for the locations where you want to replace it by the median of the surrounding pixels. But in principle, I think most people use a dark and a flat. For planetary recordings, I use neither of these. It's hardly ever needed to use them. For deep sky recordings, you need it. For solar images, you probably use it all the time, I guess.
Sorry, what was the question? I was just reading another question. What was the question?
For solar images, how often do you use image calibration?
You have to use flats.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a must. If you don't shoot flats, and I will be coming out with a tutorial on doing flats. We're just waiting for a product to be released. Once that thing's released, then the tutorial can go out. But flats is like so important when it comes down to solar and even lunar. But when it comes down to planets, nah, don't bother.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I opened the dark map, and I will clear it now so that you can see the difference. You see all the hot pixels now. I will load it again and pay close attention to the hot pixels that have disappeared. So darks is to get rid of pixels that are brighter than other pixels, basically. Another very nice option here is the row noise correction. You can see that you can switch it on with Ctrl H. So I do that, and it will like try to get rid of the noise, horizontal pattern noise that is typical of CMOS cameras. This works only if it can sample the image well. If there's plenty of dark space in the image to determine what the to try and get rid of it. You need it won't work on solar images and it won't work on lunar images typically. You can try, but it will probably not work. Similarly, some CMOS cameras have column noise instead of the row noise, so you could use that as well. You can create your master dark frame if you have a master dark recording like this one. I don't want to use any of the image stabilization options. I just go to create master dark frame, create a dark frame, and it will do that for me. So that's just stacking without anything fancy.
I'm just going to show everybody at home real quick. You won't see this, obviously, the flat frame calibration. So here's something I shot this morning, and I'm just moved the green box out of the way. You can see a bright spot here where the actual sunspot is. So I'm going to go in and load in a flat. And so you can see it, I've already created the flat frame. As soon as it loads in, you'll suddenly see it smooths everything out to create what is essentially a flat field. This is more critical for solar than anything else. And obviously if you're doing moon surface, but if you're doing planets, again, don't bother.
Okay, so the one remaining thing is the advanced features that you can find under the advanced menu. The first two options are to say, if you want that session file that I showed earlier, where it creates next to every stack a session file that explains how the stack was made and that you can load an Autostakkert to rework on old data or send to other people to work on your data. There are some options to detect horizontal, abrupt horizontal or vertical artifacts in the image. If your video data is messed up somehow, there was a problem when transmitting data from camera to computer. Sometimes you have some frames that are broken. These options can try to get rid of those frames. If it doesn't work and if it's just one frame, use the spacebar to disable the frame. So I manually press the spacebar to turn this frame into red, and then it will not use it for whatever processing I use in Autostakkert.
Is that a new feature? I didn't know about that one.
Oh no, this is like one of the oldest features in
Oh my
Autostakkert.
God, I never knew about that one.
It's so useful. It's so useful.
God, is it useful? I could have done with that earlier. Oh boy.
So you're welcome. There's the brute force alignment option. Don't really bother with that. Autostakkert tries to be smart when aligning, and that works almost always. If you put it on brute force, it will take a lot longer to process your files, and it might be slightly better, but nah, don't bother with that. If the seeing is super poor and you have imaged it a little bit too, if you have oversampled your data, if your image scale is too big, you might get some artifacts from alignment point to alignment point. Use this ultra smooth map recombination to try and fix that. Otherwise, don't bother with that. Discard worst global frames. It will try, if this feature is on, it will get rid of the worst 5% of the frames by default, and it will not use them even though they might be used by a local alignment point, or a local alignment point wants to use them. It will not be used. It's the frames that will be shown in the quality graph at the edge or at the end, and there will be a little red line underneath that will show that these were the global frames, the worst global frames that have been switched off. And then there's the experimental features and parameter tuning. There's pre-processing option, which I am experimenting a bit with for trying to tune the quality estimator. What it does is that it pre-processes the video. During analyzing and aligning, it will apply that blur, but when stacking, it will not apply that blur. So it's really only for quality analysis and for aligning everything that the video is pre-processed. It can be a bit slow, but it can give better results not that often. It's something fun for experts to play with, I'd say. Sigma clipping, that's a fun one. If you have a weird hot pixel in your video, and I think I had one video here somewhere, that pixel here. Let me go there and open it a bit bigger. There's one pixel right there that is quite bright, and if I play it, you can see that that will draw like a line on the image stack in the end if you don't get rid of that. I can't use a dead here or a dark image here because the image was already aligned before it was recorded. So this is a pixel that I cannot correct properly. But with Sigma clipping, you can say, please discard of any pixels that are out of the ordinary. By default, it's switched off. But if you have something like this, use the Sigma clipping to try and get rid of that bright pixel having an effect on your image data. And yeah, there's one more that I'm not using a lot myself, but I think more and more people are using it because they have a Dobsonian telescope and not on an equatorial mount, for example. And that's field rotation. So if the recording changes throughout, or if the rotation of the planet or orientation of the planet changes throughout the recording because you're not using an equatorial mount, but an alt-azimuth mount, then you can try and correct for that by filling in these details here.
That does actually work really well. I've played with that quite a few times, especially when we're doing like longer exposures for animation. So we don't just have the rotation. It doesn't do this weird arcing effect when we're doing the animation. It'll just rotate and move smoothly, just as if you were observing it going across the ecliptic.
Yeah, exactly.
It works. It does work.
It's a bit slow. It's not super optimized in this, and it's difficult.
We don't care. We like using it. It works.
Okay, I will not get rid of it then.
Please don't, because it does work.
Oh, and a bunch of features that I'm currently working on, but that's part of that should not be there right now. I think I've covered most of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we can come back and revisit anything else on another day if we want to do some more advanced things. Because again, this program is so vast that even though we spent an hour and a half, we still haven't covered everything. There's probably more questions than answers at this particular point, but this is a great start. I do want to launch into some of these questions here because obviously people are watching and waiting. Kristen, I've seen claims Autostakkert is the best way to debayer color images or planetary data. Can you explain why this is better than debayering in PIP or other applications? Oh, I can almost tell the answer to that.
Oh, well, then please do.
By the way, Damien Peaches here. Hello, Damien. I sent you an email. Please respond. We love you. We really do. And just to prove that I am an English guy, ta-da, accent. And he is saying hi to you, Emil.
Also say hi back.
He can hear you.
Ah, okay. Well, I hope to see him soon again, preferably somewhere around Pictimidi or something, but I'm sure he knows.
Oh, there you go. So, Kristen, let me answer that real quickly. Let me fire up Autostakkert real fast. The reason behind it is the way that it chooses how to do the debayering. When you do auto detect, it's going to look at the actual Bayer matrix. So it looks at the first pixel, pulls out the 4 colors, the subpixels, and determines which one's which. Hence, that's how the algorithm works for the automatic debayering, which you can see that I'm doing the wiggling. This is not his screen, this is my screen. So the way that other programs work is it defaults to one particular Bayer type. And then here's another problem. You end up getting these squares that show up and like a grid pattern. And that's actually because it's using the wrong type of debayering technique. Whereas the way Autostakkert is doing it is not only is it going to try and auto detect, it knows that it's a color image and it makes up for the subpixel. At least that's what the algorithm is that I've noticed the way it uses. That's why it has a better chance of doing it versus other software, which is not always applicable, because every now and then I have spotted Autostakkert will incorrectly identify something, so I have to go back in and manually do it.
I'd like to add on that,
Sure.
and that's a bit more technical. I'm lost for words. It's a bit more technical, and that's the debayering technique that it's using. So typically, if other software debayer this particular image data, this is a raw image data, and this is by Clyde Foster, and he was imaging Saturn going behind the moon, and he used a color camera. And what you see here is I debayed this particular frame, but very coarsely and only to preview that this is actually a color image. This is what Autostakkert does by default. But when stacking this image, it's treating it as if it's not debayed. It's treating it as if one image is just 25% red pixels, 25% blue pixels, 50% green pixels. And those empty parts of the image, it doesn't use. And it will fill up as the video moves about a little bit, which means that you don't end up with any gaps and that you don't end up with any interpolation within a frame, but you're just filling in the empty bins over time, meaning that the red, green, and blue channels are separated from each other completely, unlike any debayering techniques that work per frame. So resolution is higher. That's the end result, basically.
Okay, so Rafal, or yeah, I think it's pronounced Rafal, is it possible to extract and process different RGB video channels from a single video generated by a one-shot color camera? Ooh, that's an interesting one. In other words, can Autostakkert separate each individual channel out as opposed to?
It should be possible again if you know the. Right now, no. Okay, there's probably, I'm not sure if PIP can do that, the planetary image preprocessor, if it can break up a video file into RGB files. But in principle, you could go back to a raw file from a color file. Because the 25% green or red and blue pixels in every frame will not be interpolated. You could go back to the raw data again. Probably not what the user wants to know, but yeah, I think it might be possible that way. Sorry, I'm a bit caught up with the idea of trying to get back to a raw video file from a debayed video file. I think that would be possible, actually.
Okay, so Autostakkert version 5 it is.
7, version 7.
Version 7, all right. This is going to be the obvious question. When is version 4 coming out?
The obvious answer is soon.
And for those people who do not know where to find it, it's pretty obvious. Autostakkert.com is basically where you find it. So keep your eyes glued to that, and it will pop up. So
yeah, I had like a separate website where I was keeping track of beta versions, but I will put anything new on that Autostakkert.com website instead.
Yeah, that will be perfect.
But yeah, seriously, I think, I mean, I always say soon, and I always want to release it soon. It really depends on how much time I can find to work on it. And right now it is something that is, it's working, and it's much faster than version 3, especially for very big files. So I might say, okay, I can release it as it is right now, but I don't want to be too troubled with fixing stuff if it doesn't work for everyone, you know? So there's a bit of a trade-off on when I think it's good enough or not. Yeah, I hope this year. I hope by the end of this year.
Excellent. All right, so if there's any last minute, oh, okay, there is another question here. So George Hall is asking, could you comment on using Autostakkert for deep sky imaging?
Oh, I missed that one. It is tricky to use. It is okay if you have data that is and where there's no field rotation visible. I mean, it could still deal with that, but I will quickly show one recording that I already opened earlier. It's a bit too bright now. I will open the dark file, this one. So you can use it already. You can use it in service mode, and you place your alignment anchor either around a bright star, and you say, go and analyze it and see if you can track that star and see if you can track the movement in the field of, throughout the recording. So it's done that now. You can see all the frames, and it's found the worst one and it found the best one. And I can say I want to stack pretty much all of it, but don't go and use place RP in grid. It's no point. You might end up using an alignment point around every star that is not saturated. That will probably work. In general, you want to stack almost all the frames. Oh, I still have it on the drizzled mode. That will take forever. Disable drizzling. Oh, these two features, you have a cancel and a pause option. If you did something wrong, press cancel and you can back out of it. The pause one is to just hold it. So right now it stacked this file, and this was 4 GB of data, and it stacked it in 6 seconds or something. I can open that frame. And this is how I use Autostakkert for deep sky imaging.
So it does work, obviously.
So it does work, yes. But for some recordings, it will work better than for other recordings. And yeah, if you have quite simple, I mean, like you said, it's important to have the dark files here, for example. You need to get rid of all the hot pixels because otherwise they will give you little ugly streaks in the image. Flat field I don't bother with because there's light pollution, and I just find it much easier to make an artificial flat field afterwards in Photoshop. I like messing about with the data in that way. But for making the stacks, I always use Autostakkert like this. But then I end up taking multiple recordings and I manually combine them in Photoshop to improve the signal to noise ratio more, because my equatorial platform had 60 minutes of running time and I need to reset it, for example. Then the next recording will be rotated a bit. So I will combine those images manually after having stacked the raw files in Autostakkert.
All right, this is going to be the absolute last question because I really got to go to the bathroom. Do horizontal vertical artifacts at the anchor point boundaries always imply oversampling? Is multiscaling the first line of defense in that case?
I'm completely lost.
Okay, so you know how when you get the alignment points, and let's just say we have the same size, 64 for argument's sake. If I do all the auto place, but I still get vertical and horizontal lines, is that implying that my image is oversampled, or is it from something else? So think of the alignment points as they tile over each other.
Yeah.
When I process this, because I've noticed this effect too, sometimes I'll get vertical weird lines showing up, like vertical artifacts, if I'm not using multiscale.
Okay, so that's probably saying that the alignment points that you were using were too small and that they lost track, and that the alignment is, well, not quite, yeah, it's close to being random for each alignment point, meaning that yeah, from one alignment point to a next one where it happened to just track something like here with the star and here in the black space, on that edge between the two alignment points, you will get some artifact because they don't line up perfectly anymore. It's because your alignment points were too small, I would say.
Gotcha. So Joe, in your particular case, because you're probably not using multiscale, not a lot of people use multiscale, is if you have no data in one alignment point versus the one that's next to it that has data, you can quite easily drag in data into an alignment point that shouldn't be there, that created the artifact in the first place. So yes, multi-scaling in this particular case is your first line of defense.
Along with probably using slightly bigger alignment points as well.
Yeah. And different alignment points.
But this is something that you can easily check if it's artifacts created by some weird alignment points placement or not. You just stack once with a big alignment point and compare that image stack to the one where you have lots of
small ones, right?
Small ones.
Yeah.
And
so
see if there's weird things going on.
All right. We are pretty much out of time because I know Adam is going to be joining us very, very soon. And Emil, this has been one heck of an hour and 45 minutes, and I think everybody is like going mind blown. I've learned stuff that I never knew about. I'm like going, what the hell?
The space bar.
Yeah, the space bar. I never knew about that one. That is like by far and wide the. Wait a minute. I wish I knew about that earlier. Prime example would be if you happen to have something fly across the frame, a bug, a bird, or whatever.
Exactly.
That's exactly what it's for. And I've been scratching my head for years going, how the hell do I deal with this problem?
And I haven't even told you about the 99 other hidden features that are there just like this. Huh?
We could do that another time. Otherwise, we'll be here for about a month probably trying to figure all this stuff out. Emil, again, thank you very much for showing us all of this. A little bit of a shameless plug for you more than anything else. You have to understand, guys, Emil does this out of his own time. It's his time, his money, his everything. He doesn't do this for a living. He doesn't do this for anybody specifically. So when you're going to the download page, he does have a donate button. I really do suggest that you do support him. Any amount will help him. And remember, he does this in his own time. He does this pretty much for free. So to show support, we already donated some money earlier on before we even started the thing. And I really do, pressure you people out there into doing the same thing. So I'm not trying to say that you have to pay for anything, but remember, this guy does it free. So I really want him to keep on doing this. So the best thing is to do is to support him. If you can't donate anything, I'm sure some happy words will always be much appreciated. Emil.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again. We're going to have you back here again at some point. I'm pretty sure when we get a stable version of version 4 out and cover some of these hidden features. I think we should just do a whole hidden feature session because there are things in here that I'm like going, damn it, I need to know this. But sadly, we're going to run out of time. So without any more delay, I've got to go run away for a moment for obvious reasons. We will have Adam Block on next, and we'll see you in just a moment.